Hey, welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dudley. Come on, that's a good title, right? Anyway, Daily Dose of Dudley, Stave 3, Part 2. We're just about to pick it up. I just finished loading the other video. That takes a few minutes. So, anyway, tree lights came on during that time. It's on a timer, that's why I make a big deal out of this every time. I don't turn them on. So, tree lights came on during the break there. Laptop set up over there to make sure you guys are getting the video. I think I was pretty thorough with what you need for your homework, so hopefully you were able to take advantage of that. Hopefully throwing up some of those subtitles on the screen to draw your attention to some of those things was helpful as well. It still needs you doing the thinking, but that should help guide you on where to do this thinking. So we left off, we finished page 41, so we're getting ready to do page 42. Remember, this is the page in the assignment I gave you where we want to pay attention to the tone. What you're going to see starting right here is for a little bit here, all Charles Dickens does is try to create a tone, a feeling of Christmas present. Remember, the room kind of vanished and all of a sudden they're in London. They're in the city, Christmas. Okay, so we'll pick it up there. Whoa, turn 2 pages there. The house fronts looked black enough, and the windows blacker, contrasting with the smooth white sheets of snow upon the roof, and the dirtier snow upon the ground, which last deposit had been plowed up in deep furrows by the heavy wheels of carts and wagons. Now we're to page 42. Furrows that crossed and recrossed each other hundreds of times, where the great streets branched off and made intricate channels, had to trace in the thick yellow mud and icy water. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with dingy mist, half-thawed, half-frozen, whose heavier particles descended in a shower of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had, by one consent, caught fire and were blazing away to their dear heart's content. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate of the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad that the clearest summer air and brightest summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. Now I'll pay careful attention here. Look for those words that help you with tone. How does this feel? How does Charles Dickens want you to feel here? For the people who were shoveling away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another from the parapets, and now and then exchanging facetious snowball, better-natured missiles for than many a wordy jest, laughing heartily if it went right, and not less heartily if it went wrong. The poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruiterers were radiant in their glory. There were great round pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts shaped like the waistcoat of jolly old gentlemen, lolling at the doors and tumbling out into the streets in the apoplectic opulence. There were ruddy, brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish onions, shining in the fatness of their growth like Spanish friars, and winking from their shelves. Those onions were winking from their shelves. That's a good example of our personification. In wanton slyness at the girls as they went by, and glanced demurely at the hung-up mistletoe. There were pears and apples clustered high in blooming pyramids. There were bunches of grapes made in the shopkeeper's benevolence to dangle from conspicuous hooks. The people's mouths might water gratis as they passed. There were piles of filberts, mossy and brown, recalling in their fragrance, ancient walks among the woods and pleasant shufflings, ankle-deep through weathered leaves. There were Norfolk biffins, squat and swarthy, setting off the yellow of the oranges and lemons, and in the great compactness of their juicy persons, urgently entreating and beseeching to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. The very gold and silver fish set forth among these choice fruits in a bowl, though members of a dull and stagnant-blooded race, appear to know that there was something going on, and, to a fish, went gasping round and round their little world in slow and passionless excitement. There's a lot going on there. The grocers nearly closed, with perhaps 2 shutters down, or 1. But through these gaps such glimpses, it was not alone that the scales descending on the counter made a merry sound, or the twine and roller parted company so briskly, or that the canisters were rattled up and down like juggling tricks, or even that the blended scents of tea and coffee were so grateful to the nose, or even that the raisins were so plentiful and rare, the almonds so extremely white, the sticks of cinnamon so long and straight, the other spices so delicious, the candied fruit so caked and spotted with molten sugar as to make the coldest lookers-on feel faint and subsequently bilious. Nor was it that the figs were moist and pulpy, or that the French plums blushed in modest tartness from their highly decorated boxes, or that everything was good to eat in its Christmas dress. But the customers were also hurried and so eager in the hopeful promise of the day that they tumbled up against each other at the door, crashing their wicket baskets wildly, and left their purchases upon the counter, and came running back to fetch them, and committed hundreds of like mistakes, in the best humor possible, while the grocer and his people were so frank and fresh that the polished hearts with which they fastened their aprons behind might have been their own, worn outside for general inspection and for the Christmas dows to peck as if they chose. So, summarize that real quick. It's beautiful out. There's food. People are running into these stores and shops to get their food for Christmas dinner, and it said like they're so frantic that they're forgetting their stuff and having to come back in for it, but they're doing it with good nature. But soon the steeples called good people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and their gayest faces. And at the same time there emerged from scores of by-streets, lanes, and nameless turnings innumerable people carrying their dinners to the bakers' shops. In those times, you guys, sometimes people would just buy the materials and they would go, and a baker didn't just bake, but sometimes they would cook a whole dinner for you. You could pay them to do that. So that was something that people were doing. And at the same time they emerged scores by streets, lanes, namelessly, innumerable people carrying their dinners to the baker's shops. The sight of these poor revelers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he stood with Scrooge beside him in a baker's doorway, and taking off the covers as their bearers passed, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch. So the giant Ghost of Christmas Present was sprinkling something on their food as the people came by. The sight of these poor revelers, and it was very uncommon kind of torch. For once or twice, when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled each other, he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humor was restored directly. For they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day. And so it was. God love it, so it was. So even when people start to quarrel, the ghost would put a little sprinkle on the people, and they would change their tune and kind of be like, oh, what are we fighting about? It's Christmas. In time the bells ceased and the bakers were shut up, and yet there was a genial shadowing forth of all these dinners and the progress of their cooking, in the thawed blotch of wet above each baker's oven, where the pavement smoked as if its stones were cooking too. Is there a peculiar flavor in what you sprinkle from your torch? Asked Scrooge. There is. My own. Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day? Asked Scrooge. To any kindly given. To a poor one the most. Why to a poor one the most? Asked Scrooge. Because it needs it the most. It's interesting words from the ghost there, huh? Spirit, said Scrooge, after a moment's thought, I wonder you, of all the beings and the many words about us, should desire to cramp these people's opportunities of innocent enjoyment. I, cried the spirit. You would deprive them of their means of doing every seventh day, often the only day on which they can be said to dine at all, said Scrooge, wouldn't you? Aye, cried the spirit. You seek to close these places on the seventh day, said Scrooge, and it comes to the same thing. I seek, exclaimed the ghost. Forgive me if I am wrong. It has been done in your name, or at least that of your family, said Scrooge. There are some upon this earth of yours, returned the spirit, who lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are as strange to us as all our kith and kin, as if they have never lived. Remember that, and charge their doing on themselves, not us. So the ghost is saying, if people do things that are wrong in the name of Christmas, don't blame it on Christmas, blame it on those people. Scrooge promised that he would, and they went on, invisible, as they had been before, into the suburbs of the town. It was a remarkable quality of the ghost, which Scrooge had observed at the baker's, that notwithstanding his gigantic size, he could accommodate himself to any place with ease, and that he stood beneath a low roof quite as gracefully as like a supernatural creature as it was possible he could have done in any lofty hall. So no matter where they are, the ghost just automatically fits. And perhaps it was the pleasure the good spirit had in showing off this power of his, or else it was his own kind, generous, hearty nature and his sympathy with all poor men that led him straight to Scrooge's clerks. For there he went, and took Scrooge with him, holding to his robe, and on the threshold of the door the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinkling of his torch. Think of that. Bob had but 15 bob a week himself. He pocketed on Saturday but 15 copies of the Christian name, and yet the ghost of Christmas present blessed his four-roomed house. So, we're going to stop there, okay, for this one, because we're just getting ready to enter Bob Cratchit's house, and that's going to be really important. So, I'll be right back with the next one. We'll finish up Stave 3 there. We just got kind of a picture of London at Christmas, and now we know the ghost cares about the meal that is given and the meal that is for the poor the most. He says those are the most blessed meals. So we definitely know what the ghost of Christmas present is about. Now let's see what he shows Scrooge next time. I'll see you guys in just a few minutes.